Jermaine Jackson was born into a world that offered little softness and demanded constant adaptation. Raised in Gary, Indiana, in a tightly packed household on Jackson Street, his earliest years unfolded inside conditions defined by financial strain, emotional restraint, and relentless ambition. The home was crowded not only with children but with expectation, where survival itself often took priority over comfort. His father, Joseph Jackson, ruled the household with strict discipline and an unyielding belief that structure could transform hardship into greatness. His mother, Catherine, provided emotional balance where she could, though even her gentleness was stretched across an overwhelming number of responsibilities. For Jermaine, childhood was less about innocence and more about awareness. He learned early how to navigate silence, how to observe before speaking, and how to measure each action against consequence. Even ordinary moments carried weight, shaped by the understanding that time and opportunity were limited resources. Within that environment, music began as a shared language rather than a dream. It was not initially about fame but about escape, discipline, and unity. These early conditions would later become the foundation for everything he would endure, shaping him into someone capable of carrying both harmony and burden at once. Discipline, pressure, and the making of the Jackson household. Life inside the Jackson household was structured with near military precision. Joseph Jackson's parenting style emphasized repetition, discipline, and performance as the only acceptable path forward. Mistakes were corrected quickly, sometimes harshly, and praise was earned rather than given freely. For Jermaine, this environment created a constant tension between fear and focus. Every rehearsal in the living room felt like preparation for something far larger than childhood could contain. Yet beneath the strictness was an undeniable purpose. Joseph believed that talent without discipline would collapse under pressure, and so every child was trained to refine their abilities until they could withstand scrutiny. Jermaine absorbed this philosophy deeply. He learned not only how to sing but how to endure fatigue, criticism, and repetition without breaking rhythm. The household itself became both training ground and pressure cooker, shaping resilience through repetition and expectation. This environment also created emotional distance. Affection existed but was often overshadowed by instruction. Jermaine grew into a personality that understood responsibility early, sometimes at the expense of emotional freedom. That balance between discipline and emotional suppression would follow him into adulthood, especially once the world began to watch the Jackson family from afar. The birth of the Jackson 5. The formation of the Jackson 5 began almost accidentally, sparked by curiosity and persistence rather than design. What started as informal rehearsals among the Jackson brothers quickly transformed into structured performances under their father's direction. Jermaine, alongside Jackie, Tito, and Marlon, became part of a tightly synchronized group that relied on harmony, rhythm, and precision. Michael, though younger, soon emerged as the undeniable focal point due to his extraordinary vocal ability and stage presence. For Jermaine, these early years were both exhilarating and overwhelming. He was still a teenager when the group began gaining serious attention, yet the pace of development left little room for personal adjustment. Music became work, and work became identity. The group rehearsed relentlessly, refining every movement and vocal line until performances became seamless displays of coordination. Their breakthrough into professional recognition marked a turning point, where family activity transformed into global ambition. Jermaine found himself no longer performing for small audiences but stepping onto stages that demanded consistency and perfection. The Jackson 5 were no longer just a family act. They were becoming a cultural force. And within that rise, Jermaine began to understand both the privilege and the pressure of visibility. Motown, fame, and the collapse of childhood. When the Jackson 5 signed with Motown, their lives changed almost overnight. The label refined their sound, image, and performance style, positioning them for international success. Songs like I Want You Back, ABC, and I'll Be There turned them into global sensations. Jermaine, still a teenager, suddenly found himself part of an industry that moved faster than his ability to process it. Fame brought opportunity, but it also erased the boundaries of childhood. School routines disappeared, replaced by tours, interviews, rehearsals, and constant travel. Every day was structured around performance demands, leaving little space for personal development. Jermaine adapted quickly, learning to maintain composure even when exhaustion became overwhelming. Within the group dynamic, Michael's rise as a standout performer gradually shifted attention. Jermaine often provided vocal stability and emotional grounding within harmonies. but the spotlight increasingly centered on his younger brother. This shift created a quiet internal tension, one rooted not in resentment, but in the complexity of watching family evolve into legend. Motown's machine amplified this dynamic, pushing the group into relentless cycles of production and promotion. Jermaine's childhood, like that of his brothers, slowly dissolved into the machinery of fame, the weight of brotherhood and performance identity. As the Jackson 5's popularity expanded, Jermaine's role within the group became increasingly defined by balance and restraint. He was not only a performer but also a stabilizing presence within the vocal structure. While Michael captured the audience's attention with electrifying energy, Jermaine provided emotional texture and depth through his voice. However, this balance came with emotional complexity. Being part of a group where one member becomes the dominant focal point can quietly reshape identity. Jermaine experienced both pride and displacement simultaneously. He supported his brother's rise while navigating his own evolving sense of artistic purpose. On stage, the group functioned as a single unit, flawless in choreography and sound. Off stage, however, the pressures of fame, expectation, and constant travel created fatigue that could not be easily expressed. Jermaine often found himself acting as a mediator, maintaining calm within an environment that rarely paused. The emotional discipline required to sustain this role shaped his personality. He became observant, composed, and measured in expression. These traits allowed him to endure the intensity of fame, but they also contributed to an internal quietness that often went unnoticed by the outside world. Touring, exhaustion, and the loss of normal life touring during the peak of the Jackson 5 era was relentless. The schedule demanded continuous travel, performances across continents, and near-constant media engagement. For Jermaine, this meant living in a cycle where rest was fragmented and personal time nearly non-existent. The physical toll was matched by emotional fatigue. Airports, hotels, stages, and backstage rooms became the backdrop of adolescence. While other teenagers experienced gradual growth into adulthood, Jermaine's life accelerated through constant visibility. Sleep came in brief intervals, meals were rushed, and reflection was rare. Despite these pressures, performances required absolute precision. Every show demanded energy that often exceeded what he physically felt capable of giving. Yet once the stage lights turned on, professionalism took over. The audience saw harmony, energy, and joy, while behind the scenes existed exhaustion and emotional distance. Over time, Jermaine developed an internal separation between public performance and private feeling. This separation allowed him to function, but it also contributed to a growing sense of emotional isolation. Fame provided recognition, but it also removed the simplicity of a normal adolescence. Departure from Motown and defining independence. The Jackson family's decision to leave Motown in 1975 marked a major turning point. For Jermaine, the decision carried both professional and personal weight. Staying with Motown meant security but limited independence, while leaving meant uncertainty but creative freedom. Jermaine ultimately chose to remain with Motown initially, while other family members moved forward under a new direction. This decision created emotional distance within the family, especially as Michael and others pursued the next phase of their careers. It was a moment defined not by conflict, but by divergence, where shared history began to split into individual paths. This period forced Jermaine to confront independence in a way he had never experienced before. Without the collective structure of the Jackson 5, he had to navigate identity as an individual artist. The transition was not immediate or smooth, but it marked the beginning of his solo career journey. The emotional complexity of this decision stayed with him. It was not simply about music, but about loyalty, timing, and the difficulty of choosing between personal growth and family unity. Solo career and artistic reinvention. Jermaine's solo career gained momentum in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Particularly with the success of Let Us Get Serious, produced in collaboration with Stevie Wonder. This period marked a renewed sense of artistic identity. He was no longer defined solely by the Jackson 5, but as an individual artist capable of shaping his own sound. The success of his solo work brought validation, but also highlighted the challenges of sustaining long-term visibility in a rapidly evolving music industry. Jermaine adapted by refining his style, embracing contemporary sounds while maintaining his signature vocal warmth. Despite solo achievements, comparisons with Michael's rising global dominance were inevitable. Thriller-era fame reshaped the cultural landscape, placing Michael at the center of global attention. Jermaine, while successful in his own right, navigated a different scale of recognition. This contrast required emotional maturity. Rather than resisting it, Jermaine often expressed pride in his brother's success, even as he continued building his own path. His career became a blend of resilience, adaptation, and steady creative output. Family fractures and emotional complexity. Behind the public image of unity, the Jackson family experienced periods of tension, disagreement, and emotional strain. These fractures were not sudden but developed gradually through creative differences, business decisions, and the pressures of global fame. Jermaine often found himself positioned as a stabilizing figure within these dynamics. His role extended beyond performance into mediation, helping maintain communication during periods of disagreement. These responsibilities required emotional restraint and long-term perspective. The intensity of shared fame amplified both connection and conflict. When families operate within the same professional sphere, personal and professional boundaries often blur. Jermaine experienced this firsthand, navigating loyalty to both individual siblings and the collective legacy. Despite tensions, there remained an underlying foundation of shared history. Even during disagreement, the connection formed in childhood continued to influence interactions. Jermaine's perspective often reflected a desire for continuity, even when circumstances pulled the family in different directions. Marriage, family life, and private struggles. Jermaine's marriage to Hazel Gordy introduced a new dimension to his life, one shaped by domestic responsibility and emotional intimacy outside the entertainment industry. Their relationship began with optimism and mutual understanding, offering a sense of stability amid a demanding career. However, the pressures of fame, constant travel, and professional obligations gradually strained their relationship. Time apart created emotional distance, while differing expectations about privacy and lifestyle added further complexity. Despite shared commitment, maintaining balance between personal and professional life proved difficult. Their family life included moments of genuine connection, particularly around the birth of their children. Yet the demands of Jermaine's career often pulled him away from domestic consistency. Over time, these absences contributed to emotional strain that could not be easily repaired. The eventual dissolution of their marriage reflected not a single event, but a long process of separation shaped by circumstance, timing, and emotional fatigue. It became one of the most personal and challenging chapters of his life. Legacy, reflection, and enduring presence. In later years, Jermaine Jackson's legacy became defined not only by his musical contributions but by his role within one of the most influential families in entertainment history. His life reflects endurance through extraordinary visibility, emotional complexity, and generational impact. He witnessed the transformation of music culture firsthand, from Motown's structured production era to global pop dominance. Through it all, he maintained a steady presence, both as a performer and as a witness to his family's evolving legacy. Reflection became a significant part of his later perspective. Experiences that once felt overwhelming became understood as part of a larger narrative of resilience and adaptation. His contributions, while sometimes overshadowed by louder cultural moments, remain integral to the foundation of the Jackson family's global influence. Ultimately, Jermaine's story is not defined solely by fame or struggle, but by endurance. His journey illustrates the complexity of carrying legacy, identity, and personal growth within a world that rarely pauses to allow space for balance.